I'd like to just say a couple of things, some business items first before we have our opening prayer and move forward. First of all, the International Society board has inaugurated this lecture as a way for its members and potential members of the society to get to know one another and come together for a stimulating international topic for lecture and discussion. There are many of you, I would suspect, who do not know anything about the International Society. So the 30-second version is, the International Society is a group of LDS professionals who have interest and expertise in international issues. They may be currently involved internationally, as many of the society members are. As such, we received a number of emails this week from society members from far away as Singapore and as near as Linden, who could not make it tonight and who've asked for a video recording of this lecture, which we are providing. The society is free to join. There is no charge, since I believe 3 or 4 years ago the society made the decision to make membership open. It is essentially a professional networking association, but one of Latter-day Saints. Many of the board are involved with Brigham Young University, including myself and the Kennedy Center. However, many of the board are not. And that is intentional because the International Society is sort of a quasi-entity. It's supported in many ways by BYU, but it operates outside with the willful intent of attracting many of those who are ambivalent about BYU, as well as those who may not have very positive feelings, my parents included, both University of Utah graduates. We'll give you a little bit more information later tonight about how to join if you're interested, but essentially membership usually involves a conference that's held once a year. There's a poster at the back on this last year, the 16th annual conference, which was on Joseph Smith and the World, to give you a flavor of what the conference was like. That conference is an annual event. We hope that these lectures will become a monthly event. And so let me also announce on the 27th of October, we will have our second Global Work lecture. This will be on a Thursday, and I think we're going to stick with Thursdays from here on out at 7:30 here in the Kennedy Center conference room. We are pleased to welcome Mr. Mac Epps, who's the Senior Vice President for International Business at Zions Bank. Previously worked in international trade for the state of North Carolina, and before that in government service with the CIA. Mac will be talking about terrorism and personal security and some issues that may be of interest to those of you who travel or who plan to travel or who are interested in traveling safely. With all that out of the way, the last little bit of housekeeping, this lecture will be rebroadcast, and our aim is to broadcast all these lectures on a time slot that we have on BYU television. As such, we've set up a different camera arrangement tonight that will allow us to get hopefully a broadcast quality recording. We may have to do a little bit of editing afterward, but we would ask that if you need to leave during the lecture, if at all possible, if you could leave from the sides, if you think that you may need to slip out before the lecture's over, if you could, again, the camera's right here in the middle of the aisle, so it's very inopportune, but we'd ask for cooperation as much as possible with that. I'd like to begin by having an opening prayer. We've asked Adriana Sepulveda, who is a political science major from Santiago, Chile. After the opening prayer, I would like to introduce the president of the the executive director of the International Society, and then I'll introduce our speaker. Adriana.
Our dear, kind, and gracious Heavenly Father, we're so grateful for the opportunity we have to have Brother Colton here among us, and for the chance we have to hear him. We ask Thee that we can have our minds enlightened and that we will be able to understand and apply the things that He will talk about. We're so grateful for the opportunity we have to be here at BYU. We're grateful for the many blessings that we receive, for having the opportunity to gain an education, to have food and shelter. And we ask Thee that Thou can bless him, Brother Colton, that he can fulfill all of his endeavors, enlightened, and that Thou can bless our lives as well. And we love Thee and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I could just briefly introduce, we have two of the board members of the International Society here with us tonight, our executive director, Paul Heyer, and another board member and our former president, although looks like Blaine has snuck away. Oh, there you are, Blaine, right here in the front row. Look in the front row. Our former president, now a board member of the International Society. Blaine, could you just stand up and wave to everyone so everyone knows who you are? Yeah, that's definitely worthy of some applause. I'd like to just turn the time over to Paul Heyer just for a moment to say a few things about the Society.
You good people are to be complimented to come back to campus this late in the evening to hear Ambassador Colton. Indeed, he had that status when he was in Vienna those years. Some years ago, a group of us in the Republic of China, you call Taiwan, thought we've got now hundreds of LDS people over the world in important places doing important things. You'll hear one of them tonight. There are hundreds of them. But we didn't know where they were or who they were, and so we developed this society some 15, 16 years ago. And we have a data bank now of some 2,000 that a number of people, including the brethren, draw on. The president called down from Salt Lake some time ago, says, who do we talk to about Albania? And so we have a lot of people. A few days ago, I was in Ambassador Colton's neighborhood in Cambodia, where he was for 3 years. He'll mention something about that. But we have a website. I think you can try to remember it. It's like many of them, it's www. And then LDS International Society, one word, .org. Remember that one? www.lds.internationalsociety.org. Now, there's on the left side, it says profile. That means to join the society, you fill a blank. Again, it's no longer $25, it's free, as Corey said, and Corey does a great work for us with our website, with our computer work, and so forth. I could say a lot more about Corey, but I just want to say. Then, when you get in, plug on publications. I think you'll find in our newsletters, you'll find a sprinkling of some of those exciting people in different parts of the world. One comes to mind. He was the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, stationed on the Afghan border, looking after 1 or 2 million of refugees there. We got others. One who's supervising some war crime trials in Africa, and all sorts of interesting people. We try to put some of those sampling in that newsletter. And if you will let us know of others that you know that we ought to introduce to our global tribe, as I refer to it, we'd be happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. John Phil Colton, although retired, continues to be active in energy-related activities, currently by participating as a member of Governor John Huntsman's Energy Council. Immediately following his retirement in 2000, Colton served as a mission president in Cambodia, which at the time included Vietnam, Laos, and Burma. As a UN and US State Department employee, he had the chance to visit 120 countries and have contact with thousands of engineers, scientists, and diplomats. His time at the State Department includes responsibilities with the International Atomic Energy Agency, US Atomic Energy Agency, US Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and US Arms Control and Disarmament Agency. Prior to that time, he worked in the private nuclear fuels industry in Idaho Falls, Idaho, St. Louis, Missouri, and in New Haven, Connecticut. The work involved the manufacturing of nuclear fuels for research reactors, power reactors, and Navy nuclear fuels. He also had an exemplary career as a U.S. Army Reserve officer for 37 years, serving multiple times on active duty, the last being in Desert Storm in 1991. And and he retired as a colonel. After high school, he attended the University of Utah for 2 years before serving in the West German mission. Before returning home, he finished his studies in metallurgical engineering. Phil was born and raised in Vernal, Utah, and grew up working the family ranch. He and his wife, Bobby Snyder, whom he met at the University of Utah, or the U, we don't know what U means around here, married in 1962 and reside in Sandy, Utah, which is our great benefit here in the state of Utah. They have 4 children and 10 grandchildren. I must also say, One of the reasons why I thought it was especially appropriate that the society pursue and invite Phil to come tonight was because in the early stages, before the International Society had even really integrated the database into what they were doing, there was a database project that was sort of stymied. At the time it was a university database project, and it lacked vision and understanding. At that time, I was a very lowly, I'd been given the project basically to let it die, and I made the mistake of talking to Phil about this project, and in a matter of hours, he opened my eyes into what was possible. He put me in contact with people who had done similar work. In fact, he explained that he had done a very similar project at the UN, and I do believe it's not an exaggeration to say there would not be an International Society database today without Phil Colton. And he continues sending me an email a few weeks ago saying, you need to go talk to Cole Durham over in the law school, and there's a way you can improve what you're doing. So let me just warmly welcome tonight Phil Colton.
Boy, it's great to come to BYU. The last time, or one of the last times I spoke here, I chose the topic of nuclear non-proliferation and cow herding. Now, I must admit I felt much more secure on that evening. I wasn't filmed speaking about it. I appreciate very much Paul's promotion to ambassador. I never did make ambassador, but I did talk to a lot of ambassadors. They all felt that I worked for them. But what a great setting that we're here with this great picture of David M. Kennedy, a true statesman representing the standards of the church, being accepted into offices, into presidential, into king's presence, and at the same time representing the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The last time I did speak here, I was looking for a punchline. You know, you should start out with something perhaps humorous. Now, my dear friend Corey has already done that by saying that I was a graduate from the University of Utah. That's what U stands for. And so I was looking for something humorous to say, and they solved the problem for me because they had a sign on the bulletin board over here in the Union Building that said, let's trade our coach before, or let's fire our coach before we play the next game, then we have an excuse. That was a year ago, okay? Now, having watched TCU beat my alma mater in overtime, I wept when I saw BYU manage to lose their game in overtime as well. But I do wish to thank the International Society for the opportunity to speak this evening and for your attendance. It is enjoyable to see old and new friends. I was asked by Corey to spend a few minutes talking about my membership in the Church of Jesus Christ and Latter-day Saints and what impact that has had on my profession. As I indicated, as was indicated, I grew up in Vernal, Utah, where my father was an attorney and he was also a cattle rancher. It was during these formative years in Vernal that I developed a great love for people, for the land, and for animals. My mom and dad raised 4 children, teaching us good work ethics and an appreciation for the Lord's impact upon our lives. Our parents encouraged us to recognize that whatever we did, that we should do it well and realize that it would indeed impact on other lives and the environment that we associated with. It is for that reason that I chose tonight to focus on the environmental impact that various professions can have on the world and how we can possibly bring about positive influences. I'd like to introduce, as a scientist, I'm thoroughly familiar with the concept of an environmental impact, but I'm sure you are not. As societies developed and multiplied, it became apparent to the governments of these societies that large projects and changing technologies could and would have significant impacts upon the environment. Hence, the requirement was established to develop environmental impact statements to evaluate if a new project should go forward. Environmental impact statements are required reports that outline the predicted environmental effects that a project might have. The studies attempt to evaluate the possible social, economic, and environmental changes that may occur as a result of that particular activity. Most of the impact statements are mandated under the National Environmental NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act. And I will take a few minutes to just read this one sentence. It's gratis of our Congress as they enacted the NEPA Act in 1969, but there's great wisdom in it. It is only one sentence long. The Congress, recognizing the profound impact of man's activity on the interrelationships of all components of the natural environment, particularly the profound influences of population growth, high-density urbanization, industrial expansion, resource exploration, and new and expanding technological advances, and recognizing further the critical importance of restoring and maintaining environmental quality to the overall welfare and development of man, declares that it is the continuing policy of the federal government, in cooperation with state and local governments and other concerned public and private organizations, to use all practical means and measures, including financial and technical assistance, in a manner calculated to foster and promote the general welfare, to create and maintain conditions under which man and nature can exist in productive harmony, and fulfill the social, economic, and other requirements of present and future generation of Americans. End of sentence. But by doing this, the Congress did indeed recognize and want to put into place a significant law that would indeed require people to consider what their actions, their individual actions, how it might impact upon the world or the environment that they're in. The project, the environmental statement of man to contend with anger, one with another. Contention is the tool of the adversary. Peace is the tool of our Savior. What a majestic gift it is to be able to calm others. I have observed that contention impedes progress. Works slow down. Where contention prevails, there can be no united effort in any purposeful direction. Having sat through hundreds, perhaps thousands of multilateral gatherings in the United States and with our State Department, it is clear that heated arguments and debates should be supplanted by calm discussions, study, listening, and diplomatic negotiations in order to bring order from chaos. We should learn to talk together, listen together, decide together, and avoid all forms of possible contention. Progress toward goals takes place when calm prevails. We must learn to curb our anger. When contention begins, orderly progress is thwarted. I'd like to relate the following experience that exemplifies this point. I had arrived in Vienna in 1991 and was sitting at my desk on a beautiful day there at the International Atomic Energy Agency, and I was enjoying life to the fullest. And suddenly the door to my office was thrown open, and in stormed the men in gray. Now, I don't know how many of you have had the opportunity to observe Iranian diplomats. This was the Iranian ambassador that was storming into my office. But I think of them as gray. They have gray suits, they have gray sweaters, they have gray shirts, yes, they have gray beards, and gray hair, and in this case, the ambassador even had a gray walking stick. For the next 10 minutes, without exchanging the normal pleasantries that diplomats always do, he harangued me. He called me a direct descendant of the devil and an employee of a land that is the mother of all whores, amongst other things that he mentioned. Now, I must bring up a sideline. I think it was alluded to. I went to OCS, Officers Candidate School at Fort Benning, Georgia in the 1960s. And while there, I was trained in the terrible ways of war. I was taught 32 different ways to kill a person silently. During that visit with the ambassador, at least 24 of those ways went through my mind. You can imagine how I felt. Finally, in order to control my temper and not to increase the level of contention, I went to the Blackbird War. Maybe I can use this. Okay. The ambassador was still ranting and raving and going from side to side in my room. His two bodyguards were there standing. I ignored all of them and I went to the blackboard and I started to write A, B, and I drew a picture of several cows. And all this time, the ambassador initially was getting more and more angry. And suddenly he stopped. He said, "You aren't listening to me." And I said, "Mr. Ambassador, may I just tell you a story?" He said, "Yes." And he sat down for the first time in 15 minutes in my office. And he proceeded to listen. Then I told him about the day when I was 16, when my father took me to the ranch and asked if I could take a group of cattle, 20 cows with late calves, to the mountain. The mountain range being about 40 kilometers from where we were. Of course, being 16, like all boys of 16, I could do anything. I told Dad, no problem. But I must admit that as I watched Dad drive away in the truck, having unloaded my horse and myself, his eyes were in the rear vision mirror, wondering what was going to happen. Well, I proceeded to go forward. I climbed on the horse. Dad drove away in the truck. But unfortunately, the cows didn't want to go up the trail to the mountain. They went to the right. I skirted around the right flank. They went to the left, They ran past me going back. And for 30 minutes, my horse was in great lather. We didn't know what to do. I could not figure. I checked the gates. I checked to see if there was a cougar present. Nothing that would scare the cows. And then I decided I would stop. I told the ambassador this story. I stopped and I watched the cows. The cows went quietly down the road from whence we had come to the gate. On the other side of the gate was the creek. The creek contained water. The cows knew that there was no water for the next 40 kilometers. They knew they had to have water. They went, I opened the gate, they went, took water, and then almost ran to the mountain. And my father had to drive around to the top of the mountain. We almost beat him to the top of the mountain. He was very pleased. I did not tell him about the difficulty that I had. But while I was describing this story with the ambassador by placing X's and A's, we were taking cows from point A to point B and all the scientific jargon that you'd like to show, and he was thinking a formula was going to come about. He started to empathize, for I found later that he had a 16-year-old son. He understood what I was saying. When I described this to him, I told him, I noticed first of all that the ambassador calmed down, and that I certainly had calmed down. And no longer were ways of bringing about his demise going through my mind. I told him I learned a very important lesson that day at age 16. I learned that first of all, when confronted with a problem, I must understand the cause of the problem before I could solve it. I then said to the ambassador, "You have proceeded to insult me. You have verbally attacked me more than anybody before in my life, in my career. I do not understand, after the 15 minutes that you yelled at me, what the problem is. What is your problem?" By this time, he was quiet. He proceeded to elaborate the misunderstanding that had taken place. I told him there were some areas that I would be able to help him, others I wouldn't be able to help him in, and we became good friends. It ended up, the rest of the story, with him inviting me personally to go to Iran, where I did, and visited Persepolis, which is a great place to visit, to exchange of gifts. I gave him the Book of Mormon, he gave me a copy of the Quran. My mother had passed away the year he found out I had gone to the United States on emergency leave. He sent a beautiful note saying, "I know that your mother is today with God." What a wonderful thought from a person who could have been very easily my enemy. I think that it is important that we remain firm in our convictions and conduct ourselves with calm assurance under all circumstances. We must not be manipulated or enraged by those who subtly foster contention over issues of the day. The Lord said, "Behold, this is not my doctrine to stir up the hearts of man to anger one with another, but this is my doctrine that such things should be done away. Ye shall live in peace one with another," he says again in Mosiah. Those with the gift of being calm make lasting peace possible. Dealing with the world environment but not becoming of the world is a major challenge, and remaining calm and avoiding contention is instrumental to success. The next point I would like to make is the need to be dynamic and decisive in dealing with others. During our mission in Cambodia, we held several conferences in the midst of this beautiful edifice called Angkor Wat, a beautiful religious temple that at one time a historian said is the largest religious edifice in the world, and certainly by my account, the most beautiful. We walked amongst the ruins that day, and we noted that it was clear that the people who built it were directed and energetic. The so-called God Kings, for that's how the kings were known, were visionaries and hardworking. They developed and built the largest city in existence at that time, Angkor Thom. From 1200 to 1600s AD, the other great world cultures had disappeared. The civilization had collapsed, and they were no longer. Rome had burned. Athens had fallen. Persia was captured. Egypt had deteriorated to nothing but the pyramids. But the great Angkorian culture continued. What is to be learned by this experience? I believe that lesson stressed the importance of working in an urgent manner. Granted, the genius of the Khmer people, Khmer or the Cambodians, still exists in Cambodia, but for some reason things have changed. On several occasions, I was invited to sit in council with the Prime Minister and leaders of private institutions within Cambodia, and I listened to many discussions on how to improve the economic conditions in Cambodia. Great leaders with many observations and many reasons why things could not be changed. But none spoke with vision or urgency. A city such as Angkor Thom would be impossible to be built today in Cambodia due to the lack of urgency and energy. The prophet Spencer W. Kimball often spoke about the importance of urgency in work. He stated in a 1976 conference reflecting on missionary work, "Our objective is to bring the gospel to all the world. We have hardly skimmed the surface," he said. "Some few missionaries move towards their work as though they had all the time and eternity to convert a few people in that part of the world. The word is urgency. It is now. We must find ways now to inspire and reach better ways of doing and teach better ways of doing missionary work." That was his statement. True leaders, I believe, have a positive impact on the environment in which they work. They do that in part due to vision and urgency. I'd like to now return to some of the scriptures to stress several traits that have significant impact upon those that exercise as in the environment in which they work. Self-initiative and wisdom are critical in bringing about positive changes. The Lord's instructions through the prophet to church leaders in Zion, Missouri, during a terrible time of the church, time of crisis, was as follows. It is not meet that I should command in all things, for he that is compelled in all things, the same as a slothful and not a wise servant. Wherefore he receiveth no reward. Verily I say, men should be anxiously engaged in a good cause, and do many things of their own free will, and bring to pass much righteousness. For the power is in them, wherein they are agents unto themselves. And inasmuch as men do good, they shall in no wise lose their reward. But he that doeth not anything until he is commanded, and receive a commandment with doubtful heart, and keepeth it with slothfulness, the same is damned. Which of the two type of managers do we want to be? Obviously, the one that has self-initiative and does good. I have learned that in order to bring about changes, one must be anxiously involved. In 1991, as I received that assignment from the State Department to apply and was selected to serve as a senior diplomat in the UN in Vienna, I looked at the organization and I found it very inefficient. It was prone to many mistakes. They were placing a small fraction of the 16,000 that I was talking to you about that we accomplished 5 years later. And they were incapable of accomplishing the work within the budget. I had a choice. I could continue to use the same procedure and live with the work environment that I had inherited from my predecessor, or I could possibly make some changes. One of my friends, an Austrian, told me I should not work so hard. I went to work usually early in the morning. He told me I should not work so hard because a diplomat, all you need to do is you need to go to the office at 10 o'clock, you take tea at 10:30, you go and eat at 1 o'clock, and then you go home. That was his idea of what a diplomat should do, and many diplomats did that, I might add. In an international environment, with almost 40 staff members that I was working with from 15 different countries, I knew that any change would impact upon the work environment, that they would not necessarily be happy with changes. With a vision of much more efficient organization with apparent calm, I started to make changes. One day, the door opened. There was a knock on the door. This time it wasn't the ambassador. It was 32 of my, female employees. They all crowded into the room and proceeded to tell me they didn't like the changes they heard that I was making, and they all threatened to quit. Now, an average technician that worked for me spoke about 4 or 5 languages. They all were of age from 50 to 60, maybe 62 years of age. They were indeed very talented and very capable clerks. One of these clerks, a dear French lady, friend of ours, talking about the computerization, the use of computerization, she hated it. She said, she was 58, she had heard that monitors could cause infertility. I promised her that if she would just go along with this and give me a little time, that she would indeed be pleased with the systems. And as she went out of the room, I said, monitors don't make a person fertile. I must tell a side note about Christine. She was delightful. She should have been a princess. I went into her office after she'd accepted the computers, and she was quite excited about being able to use it. And one day I noticed that on her keyboard, the F8 function key had a big piece of tape across it, and a big sign coming down from the desk saying, "Do not touch." And I thought, what is this? I said, Christine, is your F8 key not functioning? He said, I don't know. I touched it once and the whole machine went kapooey, and I'm not going to touch it ever again. So she had resolved her problems with the computer. But the interesting thing was is that the product, now this took us 2 years to fulfill it, that brought about a fully automated system with happy staff members working much less hours, fewer hours, but placing more than double the number of fellows within the same budget. Had there been an impact on the working environment because of this change? Of course. Had I not been persistent and anxiously engaged in a good cause, I would have failed. The Lord said, "Knock and it shall be opened unto you." In other words, it requires effort on our part. We should not wait to be commanded in all things. We should have the ambition, we should have the desire. We should make up our minds, as far as our personal talent allows, that we will do our full share in the battle for life. It should be a matter of pride that no man or woman should do more than we will, in proportion to our ability, for completing our assignments. That has been my ambition all my life, to do my full share, and I bear testimony that in fact my family and myself have been blessed as a result. I note from my experiences in the international community that a particular powerful leader is only needed at the time of the birth of an organization or at the time of a severe crisis. Such crises are not confined to global or national problems. In the realm of one's profession, conditions exist where one is called to be anxiously engaged in matters relating to obedience, hard work, setting goals. There can be startup energy requirements, we call it anxiety, and also crises requiring anxious involvement. New or changed assignments require a motivated leader or teacher, the individual who goes beyond what is required, a visionary who sees the needs of people around him and becomes anxiously engaged in a balance of directive and participative leadership is in great demand. Let's look at the way we can become anxiously engaged. During my military career, I once studied about a brilliant military strategist, Colonel or General von Clausewitz, a German. He observed that nothing in war succeeds that is not simple. The advice fits many working situations as well. Sometimes the complexity of our involvements in good causes are simply overwhelming. We can generate so much paper, so many instructions, so many handbooks, that the simplicity of the basic task in hand is lost in the shuffle. We can smother people with administrative affection and attention. We must keep our tasks relatively simple, recognizing that each action on our part will have impact on the jobs and lives of others, environmental impacts. Unneeded anxiety also expresses itself in our hurrying, even in the case for good causes. Without proper planning, we find ourselves rushing and being hindered by that red traffic light, even though it may be on the way to a very important and good meeting. Thus, we can be anxiously engaged in a good cause, but failing to keep things in the proper perspective, having not chosen that good part, we spend much time on items that are really not important. I recall a new member in Cambodia, a Vietnamese sister, who was called to be the Relief Society president after a few months of membership. She was a recent convert, as I said, and had not been instructed, nor were there instructions on what she should do as a Relief Society president. So as she explained to me later on, she thought, what would Christ do? And then she thought that, in fact, Christ went and washed the feet of his disciples. So considering her task of doing that and her 50 members in the Relief Society, she decided that she would do that. Now, I think that was a great beneficial task. This would allow her to become acquainted intimately with the sisters, their working, their homes, their children, and she would be able to function as the leader of that branch Relief Society much better. However, she decided to do all of this, 50 visits, in 2 days. Now you have to picture Cambodia. Phnom Penh has no street signs. It has no house numbers. It has no telephones. It has no street signs. The way we tell where people live is we say the second door past the palm tree after the white gate. And that's how, turn left and then take the second door on the right. That's how Elder Kyle Larson can explain that, having visited many Vietnamese there. So she had a great job ahead of her, how to do this. And it was, she went with so much urgency and anxiety that after 2 days, she gave up. She had only visited a few. She became discouraged and she quit. She failed due to the establishment of non-achievable goals. It is important, I think, that our good causes be achievable. The next personal characteristic I feel is important in the implementation of a global career relates to the development of habits and character. Again, I draw from guidance given to us from the Lord through the prophets. Spencer W. Kimball counseled us once to take careful inventory of our habits. He said, change comes by substituting good habits for less desirable ones. Then he continued, you mold your character and future by good thoughts and acts. You can make a difference if you develop good habits. President David O. McKay stated, we sow our thoughts, we reap our actions. We sow our actions, and we reap our habits. We sow our habits, and we reap our characters. We sow our characters, and we reap our destiny. The future he speaks about relates to all of our activities, be it schooling, be it work, family responsibilities, or social responsibilities. Our habits should be a product of good thoughts expressed in good works and sustained by inner peace and determination in knowing and doing what is right. An individual is not born into this world with fixed habits. We learn through studies, through observation, and are given the privilege and opportunity of choosing which way of life we will follow, which habits we will form. Solomon the wise taught, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. As a mission president, I was taught to encourage the missionaries to develop good habits. For habits help form the missionary's character, and this remains with them the rest of their lives. President Faust, as he called us to serve, said that the success of our mission would not be measured in the number of converts, but rather in the actions of our missionaries that served under us 15 years from then. In our work assignments, we do not always know what lies ahead, but there is strength and safety in righteous conduct. We need to organize our lives correctly and chart a proper course. Then, when we're placed in a situation where automatic responses are required, we need to have habits that will kick in and aid us in making the right choice. Initially, it was somewhat tense as a senior diplomat in the Vienna, Austria circles not to drink alcoholic beverages at the countless cocktail parties that took place. After a while, however, it became clear that our choice was accepted by others as orange juice started to appear at the gatherings that we attended. In fact, many of the diplomats preferred the juice to the other drinks, and often at the end of the function we would find there is no orange juice left. Good habits should be encouraged to those that you associate with. I encourage you to form good habits, and you will be amazed to see the impact on the environment in which you reside. We should become so involved in acquiring good character or quality traits and participating in character building activities that there is no time to engage in anything worthless or harmful. Our habits should be those that make us more productive and influential. I'd like to summarize these thoughts I've discussed and ask a question. As a scientist, I always like to find a formula. Is there a formula for success in our profession. I'd like to mention 5 points in this formula which could help and will help maximize the individual contributions to the environmental impact of our professions. First, learn to love and serve the people with whom you work. No matter how you feel or what negative things might be said, you must show your love. I think back on one time when I, as a U.S. diplomat, had been badly insulted by an ambassador. I think they pick on the small guy. From a country that was not friendly to the U.S. After hearing the verbal abuse for a number of minutes, I took him aside and I said, I wish there was something I could do that would take the hate that you have for my government out of your voice, out of your mannerism, and help you in some way. I promised that I would help him, where possible, accomplish some of his valid points. Others I would not be able to. He could not believe it. I had offered kindness in return for his words of hate. That evening, later on, it was 2 o'clock in the morning as we finished that meeting, I was driving a car. It was in Geneva, Switzerland. I was driving a car back down the hillside to see this ambassador walking down the hillside, for his car driver had gone to sleep, and he had to walk maybe a mile to the hotel. I stopped and I gave him a ride. He could not believe it. He says, "You want me to ride with you?" I said, "Would you please? It's fine." But as a result of this kindness for hate, we were able to, and many countries participated in that, come up with a conclusion that was satisfactory to everybody. Later on, those of our delegation who observed the exchange of words asked me how it was that I could be kind to somebody as belligerent as an ambassador. And I responded that when I was a youth, I was taught in my Sunday school class that I should love everyone. And sometimes it was hard, but I tried my best. As a result of our work, beneficial proposals were made, and they were supported by all the countries. And in fact, the world, in a sense, was made safer. The second point, in conclusion, is the boss may not be always right, but he is always the boss. Support your supervisor, and this is important. Support your supervisor and respect his or her authority. Be obedient, honest, teachable, and follow the rules, and you will be able to influence those around you. You will strengthen the boss, and in turn he will assist you in achieving your goals. That's been my experience. Third, I believe that hard work is more important than intellect. Applying good habits coupled with the knowledge obtained through study and experience through hard work will allow one to have great influence on one's working environment. Remember what President Benson said. One of the greatest secrets of missionary work is work. That's the secret. Work, work, work. There is no satisfactory substitute. And that goes in our individual work assignments and professions. 4, never permit contention in your relationship with your supervisor, with those that work, or with those that work with you. Although there may be major cultural difference in the international forum, this is very common, and work ethic differences, do not fall into the trap of being judgmental. While at the UN we became modern due to the insistence of the US, we started to do job evaluations. Now probably in the world there's only one country that does job evaluations, and that's the United States. So I was called to, picture this, 15, 17 different nationalities to evaluate the jobs of these individuals. I brought in the American, and I didn't pull any strings. I talked frankly. I told them where they should improve, what their problems were. They said, "Thank you very much," went out, and went on their way. I called in the Filipina, and she sat down, and I proceeded to evaluate her by the same form. She was in tears. She was in hysterics. She thought I hated her. because of my criticism or my suggestions to her to work differently. Cultural impacts make a big difference. But we should not evaluate, or we should not fall into a judgmental point unless we have to, fall into the trap of being judgmental. I think we should not allow ourselves to have conflict over issues that have relatively minor consequences. Be kind to those you work with, and normally they will respond in a like manner. I have found that each person is an individual with unique strengths and talents, different from any other person in the world. Each of us has weaknesses. In harmonious relationships, there is teamwork. Usually where one is weak, the other is strong. In the late 70s, in 1976, I first received an assignment to work for the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. My boss was a Russian. In 1976, that was the height of the Cold War. I'm sure he knew everything about me. I mean, the U.S. kindly states that I'm a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserve somewhere in the Federal Register, and they read that, and they know everything about me. I knew nothing about Alexander Pushkov, Sasha. But I did learn quickly that he certainly was a challenge to me in all the areas that I've spoken about this evening. He attempted to make me drink vodka. He couldn't believe that an American wouldn't drink vodka. He kept a bottle in his desk, and later on he substituted with Coca-Cola so that I could at least toast with them. He challenged my loyalty to the United States. He always asked me, what does the Department of Energy budget look like this year? And he was lazy. He was not interested at all in work. He gave me all the responsibility of his section. But nevertheless, he seemed aware that what I was doing at all times. He was aware of that. In the end, as I returned home in 1981, Sasha kindly came to my office with a gift. He had, I think, with great forethought, searched out a beautiful painting of a Russian church. And he wrote a nice saying on the back of it, thanking me for his for the friendship I had shown him. And then he proceeded to tell me, thank you for the management principles that you have taught me. And I said, oh, you're welcome. And I said, well, such as what? He says, well, the incentive program. I had suggested that I had two Russians working for me, so I had a Russian, myself, and then two Russians working for me, that we might have an incentive program, that they could not travel unless they did a certain amount of work. And so he liked that, because then all of a sudden production went up and so forth. And so I said, are you going to take that? Oh, yes, I am professor of institute in Moscow, and I take this back to Russia with me. And then he said, I said, well, you know, what will you do? Oh, we will give incentive. Those who work harder, we give bigger incentive. Those that work smaller, then we give them smaller incentive. And I said, well, we do the same thing. We call it democracy, capitalism. And he says, oh, not capitalism. Aware communism. So Sasha taught me loyalty to one's country at that point. But I also learned something else. I wondered how he was aware of what I was doing all the time. And I said, how did you manage to, I didn't brief you or anything, how did you manage to know what projects I was working on? Oh, I like your Toto. You like my Toto? Yes, I like your Toto very much, Phil. I said, what do you mean Toto? You know, Toto. And with that, I looked over, and I had a habit professionally always having a to-do file on my desk at all times showing the active projects that I was working on. So looking upside down and reading faster than I could, right side up, he translated to-do file with Toto. So he was aware, and I learned that day about the importance of the supervisor being aware of what's going on. The fifth point, I think we should make it a standard practice that you study and understand those that you associate with. There is always something positive to be learned from associations, especially in the global work environment. I believe that each of you present can have a significant and positive impact on your environment. It may be in the classroom, it may be in your family, it may be in your neighborhood, or it just might be as the senior diplomat or representing your country. Learn your strengths and your weaknesses, work in developing good habits, and live those concepts that you have been taught that are right. In doing these things, I promise you that you will have success and you will be happy in what you are doing. I'm grateful for the experiences in life that I've had. Much of the credit goes to my family, to my parents, to my support from my wife, to those who have taught me correct principles, and above all, to the Lord who has given me the opportunity to serve professionally in many capacities. Now, brothers and sisters and friends, life is not easy. In fact, it is often quite difficult. But the Lord, I believe, is the greatest paymaster that we have. Go forth with greater commitment of making more positive contributions to your environment. I know that the Lord will bless you in your righteous endeavors. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Amen. Now, Corey mentioned that I should leave time if there are questions. You can ask me about Pushkov. You can ask me about Georgi. You can ask me about any question that you'd like to, and I'd be happy to. I'm not under any Secrets Act with the State Department any longer, but so I can pretty well be frank. Do you have any questions? Or are you waiting for the refreshments? Corey told me the secret of these success of these are going to be to have unusual refreshments and good refreshments. And so that's what I understand that they have this evening. Yes, Paul.
How should we take care of this impasse with the Iranians now?
I feel that, of course, I'm no longer in the State Department, but at the time that I was there advising in nuclear affairs, that an approach with any country of the world, be it Iran or North Korea, is to make them dependent upon the rest of the world. In the case of Iran, the Russians are taking reactors that were started by the West, by Germany, and stopped in 1974, two large reactors. And the Russians have modified those, justly so, openly and everything. And there are services that need to be obtained in order to get those operational. One of those services is called enrichment. Enrichment is a very expensive process. And if, even if it's underwritten or supported, it would be a good way to make them dependent. But to say to a country, you can't do something, is asking for problems. That's bringing the spirit of contention that I spoke earlier. So I think in the same way with North Korea. North Korea, if you recall back, before they developed the nuclear weapon, they had, and I might add that was when I was with the State Department, we had offered them, South Korea had offered them a nuclear power station so that they would have the energy that they feel is necessary. Now we are back into negotiations and so forth. But I feel that you have to let them know that you respect their desires, but also let them know that there are borders in which they cannot go over, that they are limited in that. But I think respecting the individual nationality, the autonomy of the country is very important. But as I said in here, you have to be in a position you have limits in which you will allow, and beyond that they can't go. And they need to understand that beforehand. I don't know that that's a solution. Please, back.
Besides Iran and Iraq, are there any countries in the Middle East you'd advise not traveling to?
Actually, I enjoyed Iran. Iran is more like the United States. When I woke up, I was the first American. This was in 95 or 96 that I was invited there. I was the first American officially to go there since 1974, and it was through the efforts of this ambassador. I woke up in Tehran, and it was just like waking up at the Wasatch Front. They have the same range of mountains going right down alongside. I looked out, and there are the mountains. You fly through the central part of it. It looks just like the western states. As far as traveling today, I think what I would advise is to look at the State Department advisory, because they're more attuned to what's going on in the world in the various countries better than I am. In some cases, it's health issues, the various fevers, the various illnesses that are going on. So I would advise you to do that. It's a shame. I think that Iraq, will allow you to travel eventually. I think it's just a matter of time and patience before that takes place. And I think, therefore, Iran will allow it as well. They'll allow open doors. Right now, they'll staying in the old Hilton, down with USA in bronze letters that were this tall, was on the front, met me. And all the people came up in the restaurant and said, "Are you American?" Because I had American written on my chest. And I said, "Yes, I'm American." He said, "Well, we really love America. My cousin, my brother, are all in New York City," and so forth. So because of the Shah's influence, certainly Iran is there. But again, because of the religious commitments, I think that it's very difficult in some of these countries. Please.
Seeing that you served in earlier in Myanmar, how do you see the political presence there now, and maybe what do you see
In Myanmar? That's one of my favorite topics. That Myanmar and Laos now belongs to the Thai mission. The church has transferred it back there, and the mission president in Cambodia only has to